Are we live? Looks like we're live. It is 1:53 on Tuesday afternoon. I am doing a new video. This is Mcfarlane Toys DC Multiverse Mr. Freeze from the movie Batman and Robin, as portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we can see that is an excellent likeness of Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is not an unboxing. Not an unboxing because this is a figure that was a Build-A-Figure that came from parts in 4 other action figures, which I have the boxes over here. You can see that was the ones from the Batman and Robin movie. And if you haven't seen my previous videos for those, here's what you missed out on. There's Batman himself and Robin. So there's all our title characters. But that's not all. We also had Batgirl, and we had Poison Ivy. So that was the 4 figures that came in this set, but it was actually 5 figures that came in this set altogether because we had Mr. Freeze also, who was the Build-A-Figure, and put him all together. So if you want to go back and see how I put it together, you got to watch all those other videos because, like, there was a little bit of assembly in each one of them. But this is what he looks like when he's all put together. So we're going to talk about Mr. Freeze for a little bit. First, let's talk about his freezing gun, which no Mr. Freeze figure would be complete without a freezing gun, even though Mcfarlane made their 66 figure without a freezing gun. So I don't know why. But we can see that there is a blast effect on the front there, and that is removable. So you can set that aside if you like. But looking over the design, it does look to me like very accurate to what I remember the freezing gun looking like in the movie. Interesting grip there, where it looks like he can fit his fingers in between those slots, or, he could if it was, in real life. Obviously, the way his hand is sculpted in the figure, it's one solid piece, but whatever. I do notice when I look at there's a little nozzle right here, and I'm kind of wondering if that's supposed to be like the heat section of the gun, because I know that in the comic book in Mr. Freeze's first appearance, his gun actually had a heating function, so he could also thaw out things that he had previously frozen. But it's not something that's been used very often in the comics or media since. And in fact, in his first appearance, he wasn't even named Mr. Freeze; he was named Mr. Zero. So they changed his name to Mr. Freeze when they put him on the Batman television series, probably because it was a bit more descriptive as to what he actually was. Yeah, he can only live in 0-degree temperature, but that takes a little bit of explaining. Why does he call himself Mr. Zero? Well, he can only exist in 0-degree temperature. Oh, okay. Whereas if I say Mr. Freeze, oh, his thing must be freezing stuff. Okay, cool. So yeah, I like the freezing gun. It is molded in silver plastic. I'm going to talk about the silver plastic more when I talk about the figure itself. But the freezing gun's cool. I thought they did a pretty good job with the freezing gun. Lots of good detail to it. Very sharp looking. The design of it in general is very much of a retro sci-fi looking weapon. You can see there's all kinds of like coils and those sort of Jetson looking things going on where you have like discs over poles and things like that. It's very Art Deco looking, so it's neat. I like it. Very diesel punk, I think is what they say. So Mr. Freeze himself, there we go. He also is mostly just molded in silver plastic. There's not as much paint application to it as you might think. I wish they had put a little more paint application into it. In fact, like, I think, and I've mentioned this before on figures that are molded in silver, I think it looks better when you paint stuff silver because it gives it a little more opacity with the silver paint than silver plastic. No matter what, just by its very nature, it's always a little bit translucent because it's basically like little microscopic bits of metallic particles that are embedded in a translucent plastic. That's how you make silver plastic. So it's always going to have just like a slight bit of translucentness to it. Now, this is one where I feel like they did a pretty good job with this silver plastic. And if this were just like, like an old Kenner figure, I'd be happy with it. But as far as a Mcfarlane figure goes, I kind of feel like those have always been just a step above as far as like the painting and the detailing and everything like that. So I would have expected them to paint him silver, and I think that that's what they probably should have done here. But that's a minor complaint. It's still a really good figure. I think. I don't think that the silver plastic, makes it a bad figure, but it does seem a little more cheap, if I'm being honest, than if they'd gone all out and actually done a coat of silver paint over this to give it a little more verisimilitude, shall we say. So yeah, but there are, obviously areas on the figure where the suit was supposed to glow, all these blue areas are where the suit's supposed to kind of have these glowy blue patterns to it. And unless you're going to make the figure light up, like actually put electronics in it, it's not going to do that. So they just painted it blue, and I think it's pretty effective. It still stands out pretty well. The sculpting is really nice. There's a lot of really good detail to this armor. Like I pointed out before, Arnold's likeness is fantastic. If you're a guy my age or a girl my age, also, you know what a big deal Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the 1980s, and he was like a huge action star on even into the 90s. Like Terminator 2, I think was probably the biggest movie of his career, and that came out what 91. So he was riding high at this time still. Like maybe not quite as big as he was in his heyday, but still big enough that he commanded like a top salary for this movie and got the top billing over George Clooney as Batman. So yeah, it was a big deal to get Arnold Schwarzenegger for this movie. At the time, all of us wanted Patrick Stewart to play Mr. Freeze. That was who was like the dream casting for that. Everybody expected it was going to be Patrick Stewart, and we were thrown kind of a curveball when it was Arnold Schwarzenegger. But honestly, I feel like Arnold did a good job in the role. I thought he did fine. The problems with Mr. Freeze in the movie didn't really have anything to do with Arnold himself. I think that he gave a fine performance and actually had some good dramatic moments. He had some moments where he was pretty funny. But I think kind of the problem with the movie, with Mr. Freeze in the movie, is he had some moments that were like fine dramatic moments and moments that were funny. And they just seemed kind of jarring. Like they would be kind of how do I put it? Like mood whiplash, like too close together. Like he'd be doing a scene where he was leading his henchmen in a sing along of The Year Without a Santa Claus, the Snow Miser song, and then almost immediately goes into the other room where he's got his wife's body in that frozen tube, and he's like, then he's all sad and tragic, and it's like, dude, you were just singing a song from a Christmas special, like. So I kind of feel like they probably should have picked a lane and stayed in it. And I think Arnold could have done like a Batman the Animated Series type tragic Mr. Freeze. Like if you think about his performance as the Terminator, where he's like this kind of the cold and stoic, but there's still like an element of like he's almost trying to understand emotions. And I think he could have pulled that off, where like Mr. Freeze is a guy in the animated series who claims to have all the emotions frozen out of him and be dead to all emotions, but it's clearly not the case if you watch him. And I think Arnold could have pulled that off. Likewise, if you wanted to do like a campy 1960s, Otto Preminger type Mr. Freeze with the ice puns and everything, obviously Arnold could pull that off too, because he's got good comedic talent. I think he could do that also. But they tried to kind of have their cake and eat it too with the character, which is why like I don't think it worked out quite as well as they were hoping. Now, in hindsight, I think like as the years have gone by and people have gotten a little more uh, acclimated with that version of the character, I think people have gotten kind of used to it with the mood whiplash and everything, and it's gotten to be the sort of thing where you just kind of like, well, that's what the character is in this movie, and you just kind of accept it and move on with it, and you can enjoy Arnold's performance just for what it is. So, but at the time, you know, this was the first time they tried to even do Mr. Freeze in live action since the 1960s, and the animated series was really popular at the time, and Heart of Ice was and still is probably considered like one of the best episodes, if not the best episode of Batman the Animated Series. So I think a lot of people were disappointed that it wasn't just like a straight up adaptation of Heart of Ice. So, but uh, since the character was going to be featured in a motion picture, they did do a special Mr. Freeze comic book. All four of the new characters that were introduced in Batman and Robin got their own comic book. The Batgirl one was a flashback because Batgirl Barbara Gordon was actually Oracle at the time, so they had to have that set in the past. There was a Poison Ivy one. There was a Bane one. Like, I don't remember too much about the Poison Ivy one, but I remember that I enjoyed it when I read it. The Bane one was the rematch between Batman and Bane, which hadn't actually occurred yet since Nightfall. So that was pretty cool. And probably the crown jewel of all four of these prestige format specials that they put out in honor of the movie was the Mr. Freeze special, which was written by Paul Dini himself, who wrote Heart of Ice and reinvented the character. And that one was basically a retelling of Mr. Freeze's origin, borrowing some elements from Batman, the animated series, but it took it in a bit of a darker path. And also, like, Batman himself was more involved in the origin of Mr. Freeze, as I recall. So there was some elements of tragedy to it. Now, this design of Mr. Freeze was at least kind of loosely based off of a design of one of my favorite comic book artists, Kelly Jones, who redesigned Mr. Freeze for the comic books of that time and made him look really awesome. And supposedly that was the comic book that that George that Joel Schumacher saw and said, "Hey, that's what Mr. Freeze should be. He should be like this big, massive dude. I should get Arnold Schwarzenegger to play him." So Kelly Jones kind of blamed himself for this movie. But, you know, it was still a really cool design. And I think this is still like a really cool design. I do wish that they found a way to make the dome helmet like Mr. Freeze had in the comic. You can see they kind of tried to get some of that across with this kind of clear helmet that he has in the movie, but it's weird because it doesn't even like cover up his face. I don't know. It's just kind of strange. It's kind of a strange design, but I wish they'd have found a way to give him the proper dome helmet. I think that will look really cool. So let's go ahead and put the freezing gun back into his hand. And as you saw how I had him posed in the beginning of the video, there is the foregrip here. So we can very easily slide that into his hand, and he can grip the gun with two hands. Looks really cool. And I should probably talk about his articulation, so I'm shutting up. All right, so Mr. Freeze, obviously his head rotates all the way around. He can look up about that far. So not too far, but he can look up a little bit, down about that far. So that's pretty cool. He can tilt his head kind of quizzically to the side. Arms move up about that far, which is actually probably the furthest up I've gotten to move any of these Batman and Robin figures' arms so far, even with the shoulder plat. I couldn't decide whether I want to say shoulder pads or shoulder plates. So arms rotate all the way around. The shoulder plates are somewhat articulated, so it does add a little bit of range of motion there that might not be there otherwise. He does not have the standard Mcfarlane double jointed elbows. This is an elbow where it kind of swivels at the elbow, rotates all the way around, and goes down about that far, goes up about that far. So that's how that works. He does have, looks like the typical Mcfarlane ball jointed wrists, but they are sculpted with that kind of ribbed pattern like the undersuit of Mr. Freeze's costume has. And it seems like the wrists are a little stiff on mine. I can see that there is an articulation there, but it doesn't quite want to move. Honestly, Mr. Freeze is not a character that I feel like needs a whole lot of articulation. So if you're going to have a character where like some of your articulation is stiff and doesn't want to move, Mr. Freeze is probably the guy that you want to do it. But the wrists do rotate all the way around, both at the wrist joint and at the hand joint. So that's nice. He's got the typical Mcfarlane torso articulation. We can move him all over the place. I'd never noticed this in the movie, but apparently he's got like a little skull at the base of his spine, almost like it looks like almost like a little Punisher skull. So he's got like a little skull tramp stamp embossed into his armor. So that's kind of funny. He does have the rubber Mcfarlane trunk piece. It doesn't hinder the articulation too much that way. It's actually pretty thin and soft, right where the pants meet the cod piece. So it kind of bends up fairly easily that way. Are these double jointed knees? They are not double jointed knees. There's just a single joint at the knee. So he's not quite as articulated at the knee as a Mcfarlane figure typically is. But again, with all this clunky armor, would he really be able to move that well anyway? I doubt it. So there's a certain verisimilitude to it. Ankles can move down about that far and can move up about that far. And as I mentioned in my Batman review, there's like a really stiff ratcheting to it, and it's hard for me to get the ankles like exactly where I want to have them at that dead level kind of area. The ankles do have the kind of rocker ankle kind of aspect like Mcfarlane figures typically do, but it's not a ball jointed ankle, so you can't rotate the ankle this way like side to side, except for like at where the foot is, but not where the actual ankle is. So he's not as well articulated as we're used to Mcfarlane figures being, but again, he's a guy in clunky armor, so this is probably about as articulated as he was in real life. I can't imagine that Arnold had that great a range of motion while he was wearing this suit in real life. So, and the character in Mr. Freeze probably wouldn't be too nimble either, as far as that goes. So he's an impressive-looking figure, not quite as articulated maybe as some people might like him to be, but I think he's articulated well enough. So let's go ahead and look at him next to Poison Ivy, because they work together a lot in this movie. Like, what are you supposed to be, Vine Lady? So yeah, there's that. And not too many scenes with just Arnold and Batgirl, but that's what they look like next to each other. And let's have a look at Robin. And we could pretend like he's freezing Robin. Robin's running after him, and he gets frozen. And Batman's going to have to sit him in a swimming pool and shoot it with a laser beam. And the laser beam turns the water red, because it's Joel Schumacher world. And then Batman, his arch enemy. And they look pretty cool together, I think. Cool. I made an ice pun. All right. So, I definitely recommend Mr. Freeze. And if you're going to buy the rest of these figures, you're going to get Mr. Freeze anyway, because all of his parts come with the figures. Unfortunately, since he is a Build-A-Figure, he does not have his own trading card that we can go over, but he does have the main piece of artwork on the back of the regular action figure packages. So you can see the image that would have been his trading card, had he had one. Bad news, good news situation is like even though he doesn't have a trading card, if he did have a trading card, it would just have the same text on there that all the rest of the trading cards have, since they didn't bother to give these characters individual bios, and I'm still disappointed about it. More disappointing than Mr. Freeze not having a trading card is that he does not have a figure stand, and every figure should come with a figure stand. But it's not like they gave you an extra one for, your Build-A-Figure. Like, Batman could have come with just 2 stands, I guess, and that way you could have a stand to attach to the legs that come with Batman, if nothing else. But, I think you can get extra stands on the Mcfarlane website. They might just be plain stands that don't have DC emblems on there, but do you really mind that much? It's not that big a deal. Honestly, in hindsight, now that I think about it, it might have been nice if, like, how they did something special for the boxes and gave them, like, red on the sides and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they could have given these figures, like, a red base with the Batman and Robin logo on it instead of just the plain usual DC logo base. But, I'm not going to complain too much about that. It's just, in hindsight, I just think of it, ooh, that might have been neat if they did that. But, oh well, missed opportunity. But Arnold looks great. I'm happy to have him as part of my collection. Kenner did lots of figures for the Batman and Robin movie, and most of them weren't too movie accurate, but they did do a few movie accurate Mr. Freeze figures. Like, the earliest figures in the line didn't really look much like the suit from the movie. They were more based off of, like, production design artwork, I think. But the last couple of Mr. Freeze figures they did for the movie were much more movie accurate. So better than with Poison Ivy and Batgirl, where they never got movie accurate figures. I do have one of the movie accurate Mr. Freeze figures that Kenner made, and it's the one with the glider wings, because I decided if I was going to go through the effort to try to get a movie accurate Mr. Freeze figure, I was going to get the one with the glider wings. And just for funsies, I do have the other Mcfarlane Mr. Freeze, the one that ostensibly is the comic book version, but I feel like this is an original design. Actually, and it looks more like, I think, the Batman the Animated Series design than any comic book design I've ever seen. But it does have elements of that Kelly Jones design I was talking about. Really cool. So, like with Robin and with Batgirl, I can show you a side by side of, here's what he looked like in the comic book, kinda, and here's what he looked like in the movie. So, like I said, he didn't quite look like this in the comic book, but it's probably closer to at least, any comic book design as than this is. So, and for whatever reason, his blast effect is not removable on this Freeze gun, even though it is on this Freeze gun. So that's what the two Mr. Freeze figures look like side by side. That's pretty much it for this episode. Not a whole lot else to say about Mr. Freeze, other than I'm happy to have all of these Batman and Robin figures in my collection. This is a fairly maligned movie to this day, but I think people's opinion of it has softened somewhat. Sometimes they say that familiarity breeds contempt, but I think in the case of Batman and Robin, familiarity has kind of instead bred a little bit of affection. And I think we've all come to finally appreciate this movie for what it was. Like, I think at the time, a lot of people just hated it because they thought it was just the end of the Batman franchise and that it killed off the character in movies for good. But, then the Christopher Nolan Batman movies came along, and everybody, I think, agrees that those are pretty excellent and enjoyed those. And it turned out Batman wasn't quite as dead as we thought as far as a movie franchise. So then I think people kind of softened their opinion of Batman and Robin somewhat. I know I did. And like I've mentioned before, the reaction to how goofy Batman and Robin was, caused them to rethink the Batman franchise, and they did those Nolan movies, and everybody really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed the way that Batman was portrayed in the Zack Snyder DC movies with Ben Affleck. I thought Ben Affleck was excellent in the role. I thought that was pretty much like a Batman the Animated Series type Batman come to life. I'm looking forward to that McFarlane figure if I can get it. Apparently, the pre-orders like sold out all over the place, but hopefully, I'll be able to snag one somehow. Uh, but it's one of those things. That's why I kind of just like shrug at how much I thought the Robert Pattinson Batman movie was weak as hell because, like, I don't think anything's going to kill Batman as far as the movies go nowadays. I think he's going to be around, well, like the other Joel Schumacher Batman movie said, or forever. I think Batman's gonna stand the test of time as far as being a movie character goes, and hopefully the next Batman reboot will be something that I will enjoy a little more. So as far as different iterations of Batman goes, I've enjoyed most of them. Really, the Robert Pattinson one is the only one I haven't enjoyed on any level whatsoever. So yeah, that as the Adam West Batman told us, there's always hope. So that's pretty much it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you like and subscribe and all the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Mr. Freeze, both the action figure and Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance. And also let me know what you think about just the character of Mr. Freeze in general. There's all kinds of cool stuff we could talk about in the comments if you like. And that's it for this episode. We will talk to you next time. Bye.